What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Coming to you a day late. We're actually recording in the morning on a Saturday. That never happens. Never. There is probably a 90. I don't want to give it a 100% chance because knowing my life, there are certain things that will pop up and I won't be able to get it posted. But there's about a 95% chance you're listening to this the same day we recorded it, which is normally unheard of unless if it's been a start-sit Saturday. So Saturday morning podcast. Tyler, how's it going?
Man, there's something to a Saturday morning podcast. I mean, you've got a cup of coffee with you, right? Like this feels.
I got coffee, not water.
It's a different vibe to this episode, and I can't say that I hate it, but I mean, we're probably it's just because it's a different energy. What we're doing this episode, like it's a nice little easy episode for a Saturday morning.
It's a nice easy episode because earlier this week, I'll just say things had to go ahead and get difficult. That's what I'll leave it at. We had promised you we were bringing on our first guest for this episode, and it's true. We did attempt to bring on this guest for this episode. However, we went through and recorded, and I don't want to do any slandering on this podcast of other companies that we utilize because that would be counterintuitive. We gave them our money. Why would we slander them? But we had some technical difficulties with the podcast, to say the very least. And we thought we could salvage the product. I was going back and trying to edit it, and there was just no living way possible we were going to get anything quality out of that episode. So, our first guest will be back. We'll be recording on July 7th, excuse me. We'll have that episode out for you on Friday, July 8th with our first episode. It will be a mock draft still. Just had to do some rescheduling and readjusting, and thankfully our guest was gracious enough to be wanting to first come back on, but also second, be excited to come back on. So we're grateful for that, and we're looking forward to having him back on in about a little less than a month, a couple weeks here. So just an infuriating week to try and get a podcast done, but I think there's one thing in this week though that kind of makes up for the infuriating Thursday night that we had. And that is that our draft guide is officially out for 2022, the Fellas 2022 draft guide. You can go ahead and buy that over in any of the links in our social media bios. It is $5. I made probably one of my pinnacle TikToks, and I'm disappointed I didn't actually post it on our account itself. I just posted it as a story. The top 5 things you could buy with $5. I will say the Fellas Draft Guide made it on there twice. That's how good it is. That's how good it is.
I mean, when you go through school and they teach you, the value of certain objects at a certain amount, period in time. If you have to put something on a top 5 list twice, I don't know what other way you can explain to people that this is just a steal of a deal.
It over 200 projections, statted out projections, not just like we think this player is going to score this many points. No, like we literally have targets, receptions, yards per receptions, rushing attempts, everything you could want for in relevance to fantasy stats, we have on our draft guide. Over 200 players on there, and you get projections from 3 people. So really, you're getting projections for like $1.50 plus tax a person.
And we're not even taxing you.
And we're not even taxing you. It's just $5. Just Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. You can go find those links anywhere in our social bios. Fantasy Football Fellas on Venmo, FF Fellas on both Cash App and PayPal. Just include your email when you submit your payment, so we can actually send you the draft guide. That's kind of important if you want your product. So that does make up for this past week. I will say that.
We recorded on Tuesday night, and it was draft guide day for us because
we were stoked.
Right, because the episode would come out on Wednesday, but for us, we needed to be done the Tuesday before. and that was a great feeling. And that's
Great
just
feeling.
the adrenaline of the draft guide just kind of carried us through the rest of the week.
100% did. I can 100% attest to that. That was the one thing that kept me going this week is who's bought the draft guide? Who's winning their leagues this year? And it's the people who have spent $5 on our draft guide. So go ahead and do yourself a favor. Do yourself a solid. Go buy the draft guide. I feel like there's another piece. We need to state the obvious. Cameron isn't here today. That's what was the other piece that I'm like, we got to cover that. Cameron isn't joining us today. He was around on Thursday, and we did give him his monologue in that episode. Essentially, I'll kind of summarize what Cameron had said in that podcast. So we had mentioned in our last episode that he had written down Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, and Jeff Wilson were splitting 200 carries. He meant Tyrion Davis-Price, Jeff Wilson, and Trey Sermon were splitting 200 carries. And he just firmly believes in Mike Will and Cortland Sutton as wide receiver ones. He's higher than both of them than me and Tyler are. I will say we're both in on Mike Will. I guess I can't say he's higher than Mike Will or higher on Mike Will than you and I are. We both have him as a top 12 option. But Cortland Sutton, I think he's definitely higher than us on. But Cam just believes in those guys, and he has his reasons, and I frankly don't blame him. I think Cortland Sutton could be a top 12 option this year. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. So, anyways, he's not joining us. He is up north, but he will be back next week to join us for both of our episodes. We're looking forward to it. We are going to do a mock draft in today's episode. We won't be doing it live because Cameron wouldn't be able to join us. So what we did is, since we did one with our guest on Thursday, we did it live. We'll do our next one live with him. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. But what we did, since Cameron wasn't able to join us, we just did a mock draft prior to. So this is mock draft 1.0 of this off season, and we're excited for it. We went ahead and did a 12-team PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, flex, 5 bench player mock draft. We'll get to that in a little bit. But this question, I feel like I get a lot, and I see quite a bit of debate out online all the time. And that question is, what draft strategy is the best draft strategy for fantasy football? And I can personally tell you what isn't the best strategy, if you were to ask me. And it's a strategy that some people literally live and die by. Like, they will defend it to the death of themselves. I don't quite understand it. And that's the zero RB strategy. I've never understood that strategy. Just with how deep wide receivers are, and you'll see this in our mock draft, just with how deep wide receivers are, I would rather bulk up on running backs as early as I can to then take shots on wide receivers later who could pan out. And you're going to likely find guys like Amon-Ra later in the season who are going to pull through for you. You are going to find guys, Cordero Patterson, for instance, who you could have plugged at the wide receiver position last year, right? Like, you're able to find solid contributing wide receivers in free agency. Running backs just don't grow on trees. So I can say personally, zero RB is not the best draft strategy for me personally. Again, some people live and die on that hill. I choose to not even lay foot on that hill because it would be a disgrace to my beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, zero RB to me feels like the strategy of
a coward. No, I'm kidding.
Gee, whoa, a little feisty on a Saturday morning.
I'm kidding.
No, it's the strategy of the player that wants to, I can't really say be the top trader in your league, but they are going to, I mean, it might just be this year only because this is really the first year that we're really seeing wide receivers get into this upper echelon of the first, second round territory.
Yeah, before you'd have guys like Antonio Brown and Julio Jones would be really the only 2 wide receivers even considered in the first round, and normally it would just be Antonio Brown. Now all of a sudden you have Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson for sure. Spoiler alert, Jamar Chase snuck into the first round of our mock draft here. I mean, there's 3. I think you can make an argument for 4 or 5 guys who could sneak into the first round this year, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've never seen anything like that ever. So I can understand it. Again, just not for me. When you've got running backs like Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey and you're on the front end of the draft, I mean, that's a pretty extreme example. I don't think many people are at the front of the draft are going to pass up on those guys. Maybe CMC, but I digress. Like, it's just not, it doesn't sit right with me. If I'm on the board and I'm like, there's Derrick Henry right there, and I pass him up for Cooper Kupp. Like, that doesn't sit right. But, like, spoiler alert, I took Justin Jefferson ahead of Najee Harris and Dalvin Cook. Right. But that was strategy because I knew in the second round there were going to be some other running backs.
Yep. It's going to be really interesting to see how the board develops this offseason because right now, the strategy I implemented, in this mock draft, I absolutely love. I love the strategy I used here. And it wasn't anything special. A lot of it was just kind of like BPA and floors. That's what a lot of it was for me. But I think the one strategy that you can rely on is, well, here's what I'm going to say too. And I don't think I mentioned this when we talked about this question in the podcast that never will be. That's what I'm going to refer to it as now. The podcast that will never be. I talked about this, and I don't think I talked about it in there, but I feel like the draft strategy you choose totally depends on where you're drafting or where your draft pick is. Because I am not going 0 RB if I have a top 5 pick this year. I've decided that already. I'd sniff Cooper Kupp at pick 5, but I think there's too many good running backs that I would rather have there. But in my situation, I had the 11th pick in our mock draft. I considered it. I really considered it. Not how the draft shook out, and I'm very happy that's not how the draft shook out, but like I wouldn't even consider using 0 RB unless if you're in the back half of the first round, and back half being like I'd almost consider it after pick 9. I would only consider it. So I don't know if there is a best draft strategy. I prefer to snag a running back in the first round. That's how I'll always be because I want players at the position where there's the least amount of depth. People say it's deeper this year, and it's true. It is deeper this year. But man, still, once you hit like running back 25, the fall off is pretty steep after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier, or I shouldn't say easier, but you have a greater shot of a late round wide receiver hitting than you do a late round running back. Because usually late round running backs are your handcuffs or, just your depth running backs that you're just adding to your roster just because you need some more running backs.
Yep.
So getting your running backs out of the way early, there are some people that I know in the last couple of years that were in favor of going 3 running backs in like the first 4 or 5 rounds.
That's
I'm
me.
not gonna name. I wasn't gonna name names, but if you're gonna out yourself like that, okay.
I'll out myself and I'll give my strategy that I used. Even I wouldn't draft a wide receiver until the 5th round for about 2 years in a row. Mostly because I smoked my friends in one of my leagues one year. I went running backs in the first 2 rounds. I took a tight end in the 3rd round, and then I took another running back in the 4th round. And a lot of that was where I was getting value at running back in those drafts. Like Ezekiel Elliott back in 2016 when he served his suspension. He had I think he had like a 6-game suspension or something. He was going in like the 4th round. I'm like, that's a steal. Like, I'll take Ezekiel Elliott there and just sit on him if I have 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, and then Rob Gronkowski is my tight end. Smoked everybody in that league. So then I went ahead and I did it the next year. I got burned on it because my 4th round running back didn't pay out. But it is a strategy I've seen work. I've seen other people implement the strategy. I've seen it work, but I can't put my seal of approval on it when I've had 2 completely different results because of it. I've had to tear down and rebuild my team in a season because of it. I've also smoked everybody and won a championship with it. So, yeah,
well, I think.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it goes to say that there is no strategy that is 100% guaranteed to work out every single time. Sometimes you can feel really good about going in with 0 RB and find out, oh crap, I gotta tear down and rebuild real quick if I want a chance to win. there's no strategy that will 100%. It's a 100%er, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. And and I feel like we've talked a lot about zero RB and how we don't like it. I've seen people literally in leagues that I've participated in use the strategy and win our league. Buddy of mine last year, it was in our draft, and just the way the draft was falling to him, I kept daring him. I'm like, do it. Take a wide receiver. Take a tight end. Take it. And he literally went first, I think, 4 or 5 rounds without taking a running back. And kid won our league. But my buddy won our league. I can't call him kid. He's nearly the same age as me. He's a good friend of mine. Jared, I'm sorry if you're listening. Just kind of came out. But, I mean, I've seen it win leagues, right? So, yeah, I like that. I don't think there is a draft strategy that will 100% win you your league or has an advantage. I do think it's your preference and how you like to play the game, which is what makes fantasy football so fun. So, we'll cap our question discussion there, and we'll move on to the main event of this episode, our mock draft 1.0 for this offseason. Insert transition. Whoosh, 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 whoosh.
Perfect. Nailed it.
I'm getting better. People are like, God, that's the worst transition I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, yeah, I know.
It's the low budget production of the fantasy
low
football
budget
fellas.
production of the fantasy football fellas. Yes. Hey, if you wanna support us, you wanna get us out of low budget production, draft guide, $5. I'll keep pushing it.
Just saying.
So we did, as I mentioned earlier, a 12-team PPR, 1 quarterback mock draft, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, tight end, flex, 5 bench players. Cameron had the 2nd pick. Tyler, you had the 6th pick. And I had the 11th pick. So we really weren't doing any sniping of each other. We were all on pretty different ends of the draft here, which I can appreciate. Well,
yeah,
maybe you have some thoughts on that. I feel like I didn't get sniped too much.
I got sniped at least 3 times. Yeah,
at
least 3 times by Cam. So, and it's really. I mean, I'm not going to bash Cam at all because he's going off of his rankings and whatnot, and so where he took them makes sense. But it just did not. It did not. It just didn't work out for me because I was looking at certain guys, and sure enough, there's Cam, just taking who I wanted. So.
This is the disadvantage of all 3 of us sharing our rankings with one another, is that we all know where we like players, and we all know when the other is probably going to take them. So if we really want them, we're probably going to have to reach quite a bit on them, and that's something a lot of us, we don't advocate reaching for players.
There are very few players in fantasy football that you should ever reach for, and it's really guys that are like, they had a semi-good season last year, and now they're going to take a step forward. There are only 1 or 2 people ever in a season worth reaching for, and I reaching for people is usually your downfall because you just miss out on what's in front of you.
100% agree. So we all 3 drafted separate teams. We'll cruise through the draft, how it fell. We did it on Sleeper. So we had automated picks going in between. Excuse me, all of our picks. My goodness, I am not woken up this morning at this hour. My voice is not warmed up. But we'll get some short thoughts on each of our picks. We'll let you know who went where and after who and so on and so forth. But yeah, Tyler and I will give you a few thoughts on each of our picks. Cameron gave us a few notes as well, and we'll cover his bases. And then, hey, you know what? We'll let y'all decide who mock drafted the best team. We'll post these teams on our socials later today. Tyler thinks it's him. I personally love my team, but I'm biased because it's my team. Let's dive into it. Let's cruise through our mock draft 1.0. First overall pick, I guarantee this is not how it will land in your league. Well, I can't guarantee it, but I'm about 90% sure this is not it's not how it's gonna fall in your league. Derrick Henry was the first overall pick. I can't spite the pick, but I disagree with it. I'll leave it at that.
I will never agree with it, but okay.
Sleeperbot Sleeperbot's a Tennessee Titans fan. Cameron at pick number 2. I mean, look, man, he put his money where his mouth is. He took Christian McCaffrey at the 102 over Jonathan Taylor. You have his thoughts on that? I mean, I think I saw his
Yeah.
thoughts, and his only thoughts were the best player in fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, but I think do you have Jonathan Taylor as your RB1?
I do. Well, okay. So statted out, I have Christian McCaffrey as my running back 1. I would still draft Jonathan Taylor over him. He is the only player I would draft ahead of Christian McCaffrey this year.
So I think Cam and I think so. We all three of us have CMC statted better than Jonathan Taylor.
Correct.
I think Cam and I are more willing to take the risk on CMC than Jonathan Taylor, and at that point, it's a matter of like, it's an argument of ceiling and floor, and I can completely understand going JT. It's the floor, and that's what you should honestly be looking for in the first round is positional value and the highest floor, right? Like that's what you should be looking for. Cam and I are probably on the more riskier side because we say Christian McCaffrey can literally average 25 points a week. And
he could do it in his sleep if he wants to.
And if you want to pass that up because, you want to take the safer option, that's okay. But when we beat you with Christian McCaffrey in the championship, we're not gonna feel sorry for you. That's essentially what it is.
You'll parade on their shambles because they'll be in shambles that, oh my gosh, Christian McCaffrey, wait, he dominated me? Yeah, of course he did. Just pay attention to what he's done. People will say, yeah, the best ability is availability. Yeah, look. That goes out the door. That's every first round running back. I'm sorry. Like Christian McCaffrey, his injuries have become nonlinear. I shouldn't say have become, but they are nonlinear. One has not correlated, one has not happened because of another. So, I don't mind it. I'm still taking Jonathan Taylor because I do prefer to play more of the safe floor with the first overall pick. I would rather do that, but I'm looking to draft McCaffrey as soon as the 102. I can't deny that. Jonathan Taylor then went pick number 3, Austin Eckler, Cooper Kupp. Tyler, that put you on the board, and you already mentioned who your first round pick was here.
Yeah, I went Justin Jefferson, and the only two players I really considered other than Jefferson were Najee and Dalvin Cook. And I felt more comfortable taking Najee over Dalvin Cook because I think there's a very small chance we may see I shouldn't say a regression from Cook, but I think we may see Alexander Mattison play a little bit more this year just because it is the Rams offense that's coming into Minnesota. So, at that, like I said, it really came down to Najee and JJ because Kupp was already off the board. But even if Kupp was on the board, I probably still would have gotten JJ. He's my wide receiver 1 this year. And you go ahead and call it hometown bias, but I
can't.
The trajectory that he's on and now the coach and the scheme that he's going into.
Yes.
Like this, it's a home run. There's no way he falls outside of top 5 or top 10 wide receivers this year.
I have Cooper Kupp statted ahead of Justin Jefferson by 3 fantasy points. That is literally one 20-yard reception will be the difference between those two. I don't think you can go wrong with either of those two. So, nope. I don't think Kupp is clearing away the wide receiver 1 this year. I still think he is the wide receiver 1 because there is an off chance he's still, his regression is, a whole 10 targets. But Justin Jefferson in year 3, I have him 170 targets. I think I have him at 175 targets this year.
Yeah, I mean, and even this is it's not really a contract year, but he's eligible for a contract after this year. So what he's done first year, second year, and if he can if he can have
triple
a Cooper
crown
Kupp
it this year,
right? If he can do that in his third year, he'll get paid, so he'll definitely be motivated to do well this year. Yeah,
100% agree with that. Joe Mixon went after that. Devontae Adams, Najee Harris, Dalvin Cook. That put me on the clock, and I hate drafting at the end of the first round this year. Or so I thought, I should say, before this draft. I thought I would hate drafting at the end of the first round, but how my draft shook out, I actually really enjoyed my team. With that said, pretty much all the running backs that I'd be looking at in the first round were off the board, except for one. I looked at DeAndre Swift here. I love DeAndre Swift this year. I looked at Alvin Kamara here, mostly because I know he may miss some time, but let's be real. On a points per game basis, I have Alvin Kamara as my running back 3. And that's saying something. So, yeah, I have Alvin Kamara pretty freaking high in fantasy points per game.
I mean, if he plays a full 17 game season, I think he finishes as my RB2.
Yeah, right.
I think.
Exactly. So yeah, that's something where I'm like, even at the end of the first round, I'd be willing to take a shot on that. So I played a little bit of a risky game because I figured the number 3 wide receiver in my projections wouldn't make it back to me at the next pick. And if I wanted an elite wide receiver not named Devontae Adams, I would probably have to take them right now. So it came down to Jamar Chase or Stephon Diggs. I went Jamar Chase. He's my projected wide receiver 3 this year. Look, if his sophomore leap is anything like Justin Jefferson's, could see a 15% increase in production this year. So we're talking north of 150 targets. We're talking 1,500 yards. We're talking, right, like, it is insane what Jamar Chase could potentially do this year. So I went Jamar Chase at 11. Team 12, praise the Lord, went Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce. So the running back that I was looking at pick 11 there came all the way back to me in the second round, and I went DeAndre Swift. People think we're crazy for pushing this DeAndre Swift could be the number 1 running back in fantasy football year agenda. Tell me why he can't. Tell me why he can't. His targets are very different than an Amon-Ra's, a TJ Hawkinson's, a DJ Charks, a Jameson Williams, right? Like, his targets are like separate from wide receiver targets. DeAndre Swift's targets are not wide receiver targets. DeAndre Swift, I don't think people realize this. Like, he still had a pretty good amount of rushing touchdowns. I got to pull up the numbers here, but like, people are like, oh, he doesn't get goal line work. I'm pretty sure Swift was still right around 5-6 touchdowns last year in 13 games, which is pretty good. I think we see these James Connors, these Jonathan Taylors, and we're like, well, why can't they score double digits? 5 running backs scored double-digit touchdowns last year. So are you looking at DeAndre Swift's numbers for me? I see you Googling on your computer.
Yeah, he missed 4 games last year, and he scored 5 touchdowns.
In 13 games. So that's, I know that's not like a great number, but it's almost 1 every 2 games. Almost. Mm-hmm. Just a little bit shy. So, look, if he can score 7 touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, like, that's not a bad number to be at. So, people think it's crazy that we're so optimistic on him. Look, I love DeAndre Swift. I think he could be number 1 this year. I love my start. Jamar Chase, DeAndre Swift. That's exactly how I'm looking to leave the first 2 rounds if I have one of the later picks in the draft. Nick Chubb went after that. Tyreek Hill, Alvin Kamara, CeeDee Lamb, Tyler back on the clock. Looked at a running back here.
Aaron Jones. And
Yep.
I think there is a slight concern for people taking him this early because I don't know if it's the A.J. Dillon factor. I don't know if it's I don't know exactly what it is with Aaron Jones, but it doesn't.
It's A.J. Dillon. It's A.J. Dillon. People are so concerned.
Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because...
Not the same.
Like, we've seen... I mean, look at Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon last year, and I know that's an example I've used a lot. But both of them finished top 20, didn't they? Maybe Melvin Gordon was a little outside of top 20,
no,
but still...
they were back-to-back 17-18.
See, like, both running backs can thrive this year, and... You know, A.J. Dillon probably is going to be more goal line dependent than Aaron Jones, but Aaron Jones is going to be probably the guy in the offense this year because guarantee you it's not going to be Alan Lazard. I guarantee you it's not going to be Christian Watson this year, maybe in the future, but not this year.
Right.
Like, Aaron Jones is going to be the vocal point of this offense. And even in his down year last year, he finished as RB10.
Yeah, right. And he missed, 2 games? 3 games?
If that. Like, it's kind of I want to say it's almost borderline like Stephon Diggs of the running backs, right? Because everyone's
Sure.
like, well, Stephon Diggs had such a down year last year, but Diggs still finished top 10.
He did.
Like just outside of top 5 even. So like just look at the stats and know who's left Green Bay this year. Aaron Jones is going to be the guy for Green Bay this year.
I think I have Aaron Jones seeing 85 targets this year.
I think I've got him in the 70s even.
Yeah, I think I have him at 85 targets. I also only have him with 175 rushing attempts, and he's my running back 9. Receiving work is king in PPR formats, which is what a majority of people play. Now, if we get to standard, it's a little bit of a different story. But no, getting Aaron Jones in the middle of the second round, I feel like is going to be one of the biggest steals of the draft this year, because you're going to get a top 10 guy who then you can pair with arguably the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. It's a win. It's a massive win. Mark Andrews went after that. Javonte Williams, Josh Allen. Cameron came back then and took Deebo Samuel. I don't know. I think this pick here was a lot of high upside wide receiver 1 for your team, because this is where the tier break kind of happens, I feel like, of who could potentially be the overall wide receiver 1. And I feel like Deebo is probably the last guy on this list, and he's like literally the bottom of the barrel for potential wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so Cam's, process here was it's a wide receiver 1 with high upside because we know what he did last year.
Yep.
And I think a lot of and the question with Deebo is like, what's going to happen with the rushing, because that was a big reason why he continued on his hot streak last year, we'll say, because it started out receiving and then he got involved in the rushing game, and that kind of carried him the rest of the way. So it's a matter of how much regression are we going to see in the rushing game, and now then on top of that what's Trey Lance going to do for this offense? Is he going to take away opportunities for Deebo in rushing, but is he actually going to give him the opportunity in the passing game to really be effective? But I think what we saw last year is that Deebo is a very, very good football player, and traditionally, very, very good football players stay involved in offenses.
Yeah. He'll still be involved with the 49ers passing game. They probably won't give him the same amount of rushes this year, but to say Deebo falls outside of the top 10, I feel like is a little bit of a stretch after what we saw last year. He was part of what made that team tick, and they're going to want him to do so again. Saquon Barkley, Kyle Pitts on the turn, came back to Cameron. He went Leonard Fournette here. Just another guy who has top 10 running back upside.
Yeah, and Cam has Uncle Lenny, Lombardi Lenny, as his playoff Lenny as his RB10 this year, just because he's got PPR floor and he's got touchdown upside.
Yep.
And he thought about going Fournette or even like Zeke at the 211, but he looked at the rest of the wide receivers on the board at that point and is just like, I kind of have to go Deebo because I'm going to miss out on not necessarily high upside wide receivers, but players like a Deebo Samuel.
Yep, 100%. So, yeah, to pair that, that start of CMC, Deebo, Fournette, that's a really good start if you ask me. Keep things moving. A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Patrick Mahomes went off the board next. Tyler came back to you, and you took one of the guys you just named in contender for Cameron.
There will be a TikTok video coming out later this week about why Ezekiel Elliott is going. You called Aaron Jones probably the steal of the draft in the second round. I honestly think Zeke's going to be the steal of the draft in the third round at this point.
Oh, he will. Yeah, he will.
I'm taking a minute just to kind of like calm myself, because Zeke should be nowhere in the third round. He should be going in your second, and maybe I can make an argument that he should be going at late round 1. He is not necessarily consistent, but you know what you're getting with Zeke. Yeah. The man had 100 more carries than Tony Pollard last year. Why would that change? Yes, Pollard was more efficient with the carries, but the offense is built off of Zeke in the rushing game. It really is. He had more receiving work than Tony Pollard last year. That'll probably flip this year. But guess what? The receiving work that Tony Pollard got last year is good enough to keep him relevant in PPR, right? Like I think it was that like Zeke had like the same receptions as Pollard had like targets or something like that. I think that was the stat, maybe give or take a couple, but like Zeke is going to be just fine. He's not going to lose work, and that's what everyone's saying. He's going to lose work to Pollard. No, he's not. He's not. He will be the number 2 guy, like to go, in that offense. Or what is shoot, in 2K how you can like when you're setting up your lineup and you're like, okay, my scoring preference number 1, like if you're the Warriors, you're gonna be like number 1 is Steph, number 2 is Clay, whatever, right?
Yep.
For the Cowboys, number 1 is gonna be CeeDee Lamb, number 2 is gonna be Zeke. No questions asked. That's just how it's going to be.
So you think Zeke sees more than 75 more rushing attempts? At least 75 more rushing attempts. That's what I was going for. You think Zeke sees at least 75 more rushing attempts than Tony Pollard this year?
At least.
Okay, that's fair. Because I think people will say, "Oh, he's going to lose work," and I think people expect this to be a 50-50. It's not going to be a 50-50.
It's not. It won't.
We need to get over that narrative. Like Tony Pollard is not this like Breece Hall who's going to come in and take all of Zeke's work. That is not the situation at hand here. Zeke is the better running back. Like you said, the receiving work might flip, but like this mindset of like, well, rushing attempts are going to be split. I can't buy into that whatsoever. Justin Herbert, George Kittle, Antonio Gibson, Keenan Allen went. And then it was my pick at the 3-11. And I just went with the guy. A ton of running backs off the board since my pick. I knew none of them were probably going to fall to me. But I wanted to get at least one more on my team, right? Since I did go Jamar Chase in the first and I didn't stack running backs, I knew I needed another one on my team to solidify my core for the rest of this draft then. And so I went with the guy who I'm, again, more high on. I talked about him in our last episode. I'm actually very high on him this year. I think I'm the highest out of the 3 of us. I am as my running back 13. I went David Montgomery at the 3-11, and this is like nothing special. David Montgomery is going to get all of the running back touches in Chicago. Najee, I'm not calling David Montgomery Najee Harris this year, but why was Najee Harris a top 5 fantasy running back last year? The dude was on the field for 95% of the Steelers' snaps last year. Well, he was on the field for over 900 of the Steelers' snaps last year. That's what I was trying to say. That is insane. I'm not saying David Montgomery is going to see over 900% or 900%, over 900. They're playing more than 16 games, 17 games this year.
He plays during the week.
He plays right. He's still running routes during the week. No, I'm not saying David Montgomery is going to be on the field for over 900 snaps this year. But what I am saying is he's going to get the volume and the running back touches. It's not going to be pretty or efficient. But I'm sorry. They abandoned Khalil Mack after he looked pretty freaking good last season. And David Montgomery's his second best player on the Bears. Offensively,
I mean,
it's between him and Mooney, I would
lean Montgomery just a tad,
100% agree. So I took Montgomery there. If Swift misses time, my next guy, I'm getting plenty of volume. That's all I'm concerned about there. So then on the turn went T. Higgins, Deontay Johnson, and I was bummed. I was really hoping. Actually, no, that's false because I initially was thinking, what if T. Higgins came to me in the 4th round? How much of a steal would that be? And then I remembered I drafted Jamar Chase. I'm like, I probably shouldn't stack those 2 wide receivers. That wouldn't be smart. And I was looking at the running backs. Cam Akers, James Conner, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall were all still on the board. I didn't want to take another running back. I drafted 2. I didn't need 3 in the first 4 rounds. I don't need to go that route. DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf were the next wide receivers. Michael Pittman. Look, there was plenty of guys that I was still high on, but I'm like, you know what? I'll just take positional advantage. I want Darren Waller here. If I can get Darren Waller early 4th round, I think if he's back healthy this year, defenses are less focused on him. Devontae Adams will soak up a lot of that the attention now. And you got Hunter Renfrow in the slot, who was no slouch last year. He was pretty dang good. Look, give me a healthy Darren Waller, probably 120 targets this year. They'll probably toss the ball around a little bit more. I'll take Darren Waller in the 4th round. Give me the positional advantage at tight end. And I'm set there for the rest of the draft, so all I have to do is focus on running backs and wide receivers. I'll take that all day long. So Jamar Chase, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Darren Waller, I was thrilled with that start in this draft. Cam Akers, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf went off the board next. And Tyler, man, you're putting a little bit of a pickle here because you had a lot of good options on the board, but also I really can't blame you for your pick here.
So this really sucked. Excuse me. There's no other way around it.
Right.
DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Terry McLaurin back to back to back. And I was looking at any of those guys because having Justin Jefferson gives you the advantage to take a risk with some of these guys, right? Like, I think a lot of people like to think that Terry McLaurin is a safe option this year. It's not a guarantee. Okay, DJ Moore's a safe option this year. Not a guarantee because of his quarterback. DK Metcalf, same thing as DJ Moore. Not a guarantee because of his quarterback.
Yep.
So I was willing to take a risk on one of those guys just because I had Justin Jefferson, and they went right before me, and I was like, this really, really sucks. I ended up going James Conner.
You could have reached down the board for who I know you probably would have taken with your next pick, but alas.
So here's the thing where we talked about like reaching for guys because we know where how we have certain guys ranked.
Yep.
I almost went Mike Williams here.
Yeah.
Because
I wouldn't have blamed you.
Because I didn't think I would be able to get him past Cam twice.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I took the chance and it didn't work. But hey, that's why we do mock drafts. So I just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go 3 running backs because I know, with James Conner, he's the touchdown. I shouldn't say dependent. He's going to be the running back that scores the touchdowns this year. That if you build your team off of just people who score touchdowns, because that's 6 points, just like that. Like James Conner is going to be the guy that you target, and it remains to be seen how the offense will work with Darrell Williams, who is more of a receiving back, and James Conner. But I was like, you know what? To have James Conner as my 3rd running back, that's a very good situation to be in.
That's a fabulous situation to be in.
And again, I was like, I could take a chance on not taking a receiver because, again, Justin Jefferson. So I went James Conner, and I didn't hate it, but I would have much rather preferred one of the 3 receivers that went right before.
So this is one of those scenarios, though. I talked about 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds and how you could build your team around that. This would be my dream team, that I could build that around, right? You get stud wide receiver. You get one for sure top 10 running back in our rankings, one who is probably borderline running back 1, James Conner, who is relatively in the same range as Zeke for us. Mm-hmm. You have 3 top 20 running backs on your team. That's a spot I want to be in. I want to be in that spot, and arguably the overall wide receiver 1, who could be a player who could be the overall wide receiver 1 this year. That is a fantastic spot to be in. And then the rest of your draft, I'll let you explain that, not explain, but share the rest of your picks. But look, with how the rest of your draft shook out, this was a brilliant start. So after James Conner went Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Jalen Waddle, Cameron. Well, I'm surprised he went with this player first over player number 2. This one shocked me a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just combine them. He went Courtland Sutton and Mike Williams, and
no surprise to either of us.
Yeah, no surprise. And I don't think we were surprised that he was going to take Mike Williams. I think we weren't surprised by Courtland Sutton, but I think again, just he took Sutton in the 4th and Mike Williams in the 5th. But that may just be the sleeper big board. That may be the reason why, because who knows?
Yeah.
he is just so in on both of these guys just because red zone opportunity, target shares, high volume offenses, like it like to pair those guys up with Deebo Samuel feels like the ideal situation, because if Deebo doesn't pan out, there's a good chance Sutton and Mike Williams will pan out. So, like, at worst, Deebo can be a really high end, and when I say really high end, like really, 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 really high end flex in Deebo Samuel, right? Like, that's
There's
the
not
worst situation it can be.
There is a world where Deebo could fall outside of the top 15 wide receivers this year, no question.
But that still puts him as high end flex.
Right, still puts him as a high end flex. Exactly. So yeah, in between Sutton and Mike Williams went J.K. Dobbins and Amari Cooper. Do you think Cam would have gone J.K. Dobbins over Mike Williams if J.K. Dobbins dropped him?
See, I think if I had taken Mike Williams, he definitely would have gone J.K. Dobbins in the 5th. But
yep.
I think we both know just how much like he adores Mike Williams compared to. I mean, he really, really likes J.K. Dobbins, but he likes Mike Williams that much more.
Yep, definitely agree. Let's cruise through the rest of our teams here because we're already pretty far into this podcast. Travis Etienne, Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy went after Cameron. Tyler grabbed your first quarterback here. Well, I shouldn't say your first quarterback. You grabbed your quarterback here.
Yeah. I snagged Lamar. This is probably the one pick I'm still kind of confused on, like what my thought process was exactly.
I was kind of surprised you went this route.
Yeah, and some of the wide receivers I was looking at, like Mike Williams, like I don't know why I thought I could get him in the 5th, but like Michael Pittman also like went, and I was like, that would have been ideal for my second wide receiver. And then I looked at the rest of the wide receivers. I said like guys like Brandon Cooks, guys like Chris Godwin, maybe, or DeAndre Hopkins even, like I can give them the time because of all the other wide receivers I can later take in the draft. I thought I could get them in the 6th, and sure enough, spoiler alert, I didn't get them because they all went before me. So I just went with Lamar.
BPA.
The offense, pretty much. I think the offense, Baltimore's offense is going to be so run heavy this year that there's a chance Lamar actually finishes as like a top 3 quarterback, and I think everyone's saying like he'll be like 4 or 5. Yep. But there's a chance that like Lamar could finish QB2. I don't know if QB1 just because Josh Allen, but like a long shot, sure.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. That's what I always say. Like, his upside could be the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football. That's not absurd to say. I think that's just the truth. Elijah Mitchell, Joe Burrow, TJ Hawkinson, Kyler Murray went next. I needed my wide receiver 2. The wide receiver 2s were getting pretty thin here. I mean, again, you still have like the Chris Godwins, the Michael Thomases of the world. Allen Robinson was on the board still. I went with safety, though. I know how boom-bust Jamar was last season because he did disappear for a stretch of games there. I shouldn't say he was boom-bust, but like there would be games where you'd get 25 from Jamar. There'd be games where you'd get 3 from Jamar, right? So I wanted a little bit of stability. I went with the guy who's been a top 20 wide receiver literally 6 out of 7 years of his career. He's had a 1,000-yard season 6 out of 7 years of his career. Brandon Cooks. Literally the label of consistency. I have him as a top 25 wide receiver this year. I'm surprised I didn't have him as a top 20 wide receiver, honestly. But with a few tweaks in the rankings, I wouldn't be surprised if I get him there. So I went Brandon Cooks there. I love my team. I have stability in both of my wide receiver and running back 2s. I've got a top-tier tight end, and I have 2 players who could be the number 1 at their position this year. So I was thrilled with how this was going so far. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders went on the turn, came back to me. And this was a point where I had 3 pass catchers and 2 running backs, so I wanted to beef up on running back a little bit more. And again, this was one where how much of a risk do I want to take with my running back 3? Since, DeAndre Swift, he has only played 13 games. He's never played more than 13 games in a season. I don't want to just assume he's automatically going to play 17 this year. We stat him out for 17 in our projections, but we do factor in risk after our projections. Like, it's the reason why I have Saquon Barkley statted out to be a top 10 running back in 17 games this year. I also know it's probably not likely he's going to play 17 games this year, so I'm not going to take him top 10. I'm top 12 borderline, but again, I could explain that all day long. Point being, I looked at Cordero Patterson. I have Cordero Patterson borderline top 20 running back this year. I think he just gets enough receiving work this year. I also looked at Kareem Hunt here. I love Kareem Hunt's PPR upside. The whole contract situation scares me a little bit because I don't know if he's going to be in Cleveland, and I don't know if the team he's going to go to, he's going to get a full role. Going to the Rams, I've heard that rumor so much. It makes so much sense. I'm I would hate it for fantasy if he landed on the Rams. I would hate that.
Yep. Hate it.
I went with consistency. That's kind of the theme for the rest of this draft is who's going to give me upside and consistency. So I went A.J. Dillon. Going to get a majority of the rushing volume. He'll get a majority of the goal line work. We saw what he could do. If Aaron Jones misses any time, A.J. Dillon was a top 12 running back during that stretch. So I'm getting a solidified borderline running back 2, strong flex play. And if anything happens to Aaron Jones, immediate running back 1. So I loved it getting A.J. Dillon as my running back 3 in the 6th round there. I think that was honestly one of my picks I didn't find super sexy. It was one of those where as I was looking back on the draft, I'm I definitely made the right decision there to draft A.J. Dillon.
Absolutely.
Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, Tyler, came back to you. And again, I'm a little bit surprised you went this route, but looking at the board, I'm also not.
This came down to Dalton Schultz and Marquise Brown for me because I still needed a wide receiver 2. I like the potential opportunity that Marquise Brown has this year with DeAndre Hopkins missing 6 games. But I ended up going Dalton Schultz. And the only reason why, or I shouldn't say the only reason why, but I knew he was kind of falling on the big board at this point, so maybe I got fooled a little bit, but Dalton Schultz has top 5 upside this year because of Amari Cooper leaving, and after his breakout season last year, let's call it as it is. Let's call it spade a spade. It was a breakout season for him.
Yep.
I just said, you know what? Let's just lock away the tight end position here. Let's just not worry about it for the rest of the draft because I can find some other wide receivers to kind of fill in later rounds.
You did. Spoiler alert. You did. Seriously, I know I'm talking on my draft. The way your draft fell, I am astounded, honestly. You nailed the rest of your draft.
I like it. It was okay.
Where do you have Dalton Schultz in your rankings, in your projections?
I think I've got him. Oh, actually, you know what? I've got him as my tight end 6.
I have him as my tight end 5. So, Dalton Schultz has he could finish top 3 again this year. I don't think either of us would be surprised if that happens. With Amari Cooper now gone, some of those targets will fill to Schultz. So, yeah, I love that pick. Dalton Schultz is going to be one of my favorite mid-round picks this year, I think, because I can get a positional advantage in the middle rounds with a guy who's going to get steady consistency. So, yeah, I 100% agree with that. Let's keep cruising along here. We only got a few minutes to literally get through another 6 rounds, so I'll cruise through these names. We'll list Cameron's. We'll literally, if you just want to read his bullets, we'll keep moving.
Yeah, cool.
Marquise Brown, Adam Thielen, Dallas Goedert. Cameron went Kareem Hunt at the 6'11".
Yeah, and he just said it's an extremely safe RB3 with huge upside because it's PPR.
Yep, 100%. Every time he's been, or before, oh my goodness, in healthy games since coming to the Cleveland Browns, literally in healthy games throughout his career, he's always been a top 12 running back, which is absurd. So the fact he's going as, the running back 29 in drafts is still crazy to me. Jalen Hurts, Darnell Mooney came back to Cameron, took one of his favorite guys, Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, I remember when the pick went through, I was like, that seems a little early. But then I looked at just where I was drafting, and I'm like, if Bateman was there at the 706, I would have taken Bateman. So this is not a reach at all. It's a wide receiver 1, and Bateman is his guy.
Bateman's his guy. I think he could easily see north of 125 targets this year. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. So I'm with you. I like Bateman there at the 702. Juju Smith-Schuster, Damian Harris, Ken Walker, Tyler came to you, and man, I am telling you this. If you could punt on your wide receiver 2 for this long and get this guy as your wide receiver 2, I can't believe I'm saying this because I have not been the biggest advocate of this player, but I have him as a top 20 wide receiver this year.
You have him as a top 20?
He's my wide receiver 19.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better about getting him here then.
So that's why I'm so shocked.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 29, but he does have the wide receiver 2 upside for sure. I just don't know how much of what we saw last year was just I don't know how my words are hard on a Saturday morning.
Yes, I am.
I don't think it's such a guarantee that what we saw at the end of last year translates over to this year, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's just because I didn't pay that much attention to it when it was happening, but
sure.
For how the draft has played out, having a flex already with James Conner because he's my third running back, I was like, you know what, I can take Amon-Ra and feel very, very good about it.
He's going to be safe. He gets all the slot targets. It is an extremely safe floor from the slot. Essentially, how I have Amon-Ra statted out, I essentially have him for the exact same stat line as last year because a lot of his production came from his boom the second half of last season. I just literally extrapolated that over 17 games because I think that's a dog. I heard dog in the background there.
Dog.
Essentially, that's what I did. I have Amon-Ra with the exact same stat line, and it's not crazy absurd because DeAndre Swift is going to see targets. TJ Hawkinson is going to see targets. Jameson Williams, when he comes back, is going to see targets. They didn't sign DJ Chark to just stand there and look pretty on the outside. Look, I think Amon-Ra still sees good volume, but I think he just sees a similar stat line to last season. 120-plus targets, 90-plus receptions, just under 1,000 yards, give him an extra touchdown, and 100 rushing yards. That's it. Just kind of volumes his way to a top 20 wide receiver for me. So, yeah, no, that's a great wide receiver 2 to have, I think. Tyler Lockett, Cordero Patterson, Dak Prescott, Treylon Burks went off the board next. And again, I was just looking at the wide receivers. Nobody I was really thrilled with. And frankly, if there's anything that I've kind of learned throughout doing mock drafts this year, I just want to stack up on running backs as early and often as I can, unless I want to get my solidified base of players first. And I felt like I had a really solidified base. Now I'm just taking running backs until there isn't one that I really like. And there's one that I still really liked. Chase Edmonds I went with at the 7-11. Not a sponsor, ironically enough. Just coincidence. I went with Chase Edmonds at the 7-11. I have him as a top 30 running back. He's in a great system for that to happen. He has the receiving upside. Myles Gaskin saw 60 targets last season. Myles Gaskin was top 12 in targets amongst running backs last year. I don't think it's unreasonable that Chase Edmonds could see at least 3.5 targets a game to kind of get him to that 60 target range. So I loved that pick at the 7-11. Russell Wilson, Drake London. I went Gabe Davison at the 802. Needed a wide receiver 3. Just went high upside. Top 35 wide receiver for me this year. I think he comes into his own this year. Just really didn't like any of the other wide receiver options and knew I wanted to bulk up. And frankly, I was really hoping another player was going to wrap his way back to me, but I should have known Tyler Cameron was probably going to take him after I've been hyping him up so much. Dawson Knox, Hunter Renfrow, Garrett Wilson, Devonta Smith, and of course Tyler took the guy I was hoping would somehow make it a whole 2 rounds back to me.
Christian Kirk. And
people are sleeping on him.
Everyone is. And I think this is just the overreaction to the contract that he signed. We can all agree that his contract is probably one of the worst contracts we've ever seen.
Yes.
But that signals to me that they want to utilize him, that they want him to be the wide receiver 1. And in a Doug Peterson RPO slant-heavy offense, that's what Christian Kirk does really, really well. He's also a very, very good deep threat as well. So getting probably the wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville in what will be a much, much, much improved Jacksonville offense, grabbing him as my wide receiver 3 was really kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I am in on Christian Kirk this year. I do have him as a top 30 wide receiver. Again, I played the board, and I was really hoping Christian Kirk would wrap around, and like I said, I should have known he wasn't going to with who I'm drafting with. So Elijah Moore, Devin Singletary, Brandon Ayuk, Cameron grabbed his quarterback here.
Tom Brady. And
the GOAT.
He's QB7 on Cam's like quarterback rankings, and that gives him a little Brady Lenny stack. So
yeah,
it
don't
really
hate
was
that
no brainer for him.
Yeah, don't hate that quarterback running back stack. Melvin Gordon, Chris Olave, Cameron. I think this is a guy he doesn't really want to like publicly state he believes in. But I think he really likes
does.
this guy. He sneaky likes this guy. I've talked him into it.
And it's not really sneaky likes, it is a sneaky love this guy because
sure, sneaky love, that works.
Because here's the thing. You look at what Arizona's going to have to do for the first 6 games without DeAndre Hopkins, and Zach Ertz was really, when he got to Arizona, he took off
really
last year.
Good. Yeah.
Here's why he loves Zach Ertz. And I'm going to use myself in this scenario. I have Dalton Schultz as my tight end 6. I also have Zach Ertz as my tight end 7. Dalton Schultz went at the 607 and Zach Ertz went at the 902. You are getting insane value for where you're getting Zach Ertz and where he will finish. He is a guaranteed top 10 lock this year because he still has a little bit left in the tank and the offense needs him to step up with DeAndre Hopkins out.
Yep, I can't agree with that more. We saw without D-Hop last year, I believe Zach Ertz was a top 5 tight end without DeAndre Hopkins last year.
Correct.
Zach Ertz is such a great value, and people aren't going to respect that. And Zach Cameron, I think that's going to be his Gerald Everett this year, except Zach Ertz is superior to Gerald Everett this year. James Cook, Aaron Rodgers, Tony Pollard. Tyler, you were back on the clock, took another wide receiver here.
Yeah, maybe Russell Gage here at the 906 was a little early, but I was just kind of throwing darts at the wide receiver board, and I was just like, I like Russell Gage the most out of who's left on the board. As long as Chris Godwin's out, Russell Gage is going to outperform the ADP that he's going at right now. But the question is just like, when Godwin comes back, what's going to happen? And literally no one knows. But what we do know is that this offense has supported 3 wide receivers in the past with Evans, Godwin, and AB, and Antonio Brown. I'm not saying Russell Gage is Antonio Brown, and I'm not saying Russell Gage is as good as Godwin or Mike Evans, but what we have seen in the past is that he's produced with Matt Ryan.
And
now
Brady,
he's getting up.
Go ahead.
Right. He's getting Tom Brady now.
And Brady's been advocating for him all season. He's got to have a big year. Brady's the one who got him to Tampa, right? Like, Brady's in on Russell Gage. That says something to me. When Tom Brady says something, you should be paying attention. And I'm paying attention. So, Matthew Stafford, Rashad Penny, Pat Freiermuth, Chase Claypool. Look, I'll be honest. I was really hoping one of Brady, Rodgers, or Stafford would make it back to me, and these stupid sleeper bots decided to take 2 quarterbacks. So I was pissed. I'm like, I struck out on quarterback, essentially. I waited too long. I should have gone one instead of Gabe Davis. With that said, I needed another wide receiver, so I don't regret that pick. Hindsight 2020, I probably should have waited. Not really. I don't think it would have made a difference. I probably should have gone Derek Carr instead of Trey Lance for the Waller-Carr stack that I would have done.
Oh, sure.
Not like a spicy take, but just like bonus fantasy points. And with Devontae Adams, I think Derek Carr probably will be better this year. I went Trey Lance though. I have Trey Lance as a top 12 quarterback. Look, the rushing upside could be massive this year. He could see Lamar like rushing volume. I say Lamar like. I'm not saying he and Lamar are on equal levels, but again, Trey Lance wants to run the football, and he will rush it in for touchdowns. Like, he could be this year's sneaky Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's crazy to say. So I went Trey Lance there. Trey Lance is my guy. I love Trey Lance. So, Tyler, Tyler, for the last 3 rounds here, let's just share our last 3 picks. Give one reason why we took the player, because we're already over an hour here and we need to wrap this thing up. So, Robert Woods, Mike Gesicki went on the turn. My last 3 picks went Michael Gallup. Look, I think getting him in the 10th round as my wide receiver 4 is going to be a massive steal. Yes, he's coming off of an ACL. He only played 14 games in before CeeDee Lamb was drafted, so that would have been 2019. He was the wide receiver 22 in 14 games, and Amari Cooper's gone. Michael Gallup's the wide receiver 2 in that offense again. If you got that kind of volume without CeeDee Lamb, I think he can get it without Amari Cooper. No, we're almost done. You look annoyed. It's all right. People love Mo. Mo just needs a feature on the pod. We just need to get him a mic. That's what we need to do.
He's forcing his way onto the mic at this moment.
Yeah,
so.
at this moment he is. I'll keep going. I took Nyheim Hines in the 11th round. PPR upside. And if anything happens to Jonathan Taylor, I couldn't even hear that. You're rolling your eyes now, but I couldn't even hear that. So you're good. I took Nyheim Hines in the 11th. PPR upside. Anything happens to Jonathan Taylor. I don't want to assume anything happens to Jonathan Taylor. Nyheim Hines is next in line. I have Nyheim scary high. I have Nyheim Hines as a top 40 running back. Actually, I think I have him as a top. I think I have him inside my top 35. I just have him getting that much PPR work. Matt Ryan likes to check down. He'll be a beneficiary of that. I'll have to tweak that a little bit, but. Lastly, in the 12th, I took MVS, high upside pick. That's it. I threw a dart at a wide receiver. Give me a guy who's paired with Patrick Mahomes and has big downfield playability. So those are my last 3 picks. Tyler, you wrapped up your draft with.
Please excuse the dog's nuts. Tantrum right now.
I can read your picks if you want me to. If you just want to stay on mute, I'll cruise through your picks.
I got it. So 10:07, I went Ronald Jones. Just grabbing depth at running back. I mean, because you need at least 4 running backs. That's just how fantasy football works. Yep. There's a chance that Ronald Jones really ends up taking majority of the rushes in Kansas City. Just who knows how that backfield's going to work with CEH and Ronald Jones. So I was like, I mean, when I say that, that's purely speculation. There's nothing to back it up that like Ronald Jones will actually take over the backfield.
Right.
I'm just taking a shot on a guy. 11:06, I went Alan Lazard. That's probably my favorite pick because it's Rodgers wide receiver 1 in the 11th round. Like, yeah,
there's potential value there. Yep.
Right. And at the worst, he's a depth wide receiver because I Russell Gage, Christian Kirk, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, like that. Yeah, low risk pick right there. And then 12:07, I was thinking about it this morning. And I should say this. I went Darrell Williams first, or I ended up taking Darrell Williams in the mock, and this was just purely handcuff territory for me because James Conner tends to miss a chunk of games. But what I saw this morning makes me regret my pick because I would have gone with Jarvis Landry because there's a video going around on Twitter of Michael Thomas kind of. What at NOF Network tweeted said Michael Thomas getting some work in, and it's him box jumping
on 1
foot. On 1 foot 24 inches, so 2 feet.
I believe it is. Yeah.
And
that isn't that high.
That's not that high. And then
that's not a big box jump.
No, and a Twitter account by the handle of at Football Injury Doc, which is Edwin Porras. He quoted the video and just like, if this is rehab 2 years later, I just don't know what to think. And I sent that to both Lucas and Cam, and we were all just kind of like,
yikes.
Michael Thomas is going down in our rankings today. Jarvis Landry's going to move up. Like I probably should have gone Jarvis Landry, but I'm not going to bash a handcuff running back pick at the last round of our mock.
And I loved that pick for you. I thought that was a brilliant pick. I think Darrell Williams has massive PPR upside this year. Like he could be a Chase Edmonds type player this year. James Conner only saw 5 targets before Chase Edmonds got injured last year. So I don't think it's otherworldly to think that. Cameron with his last 3 picks: Ramondre Stevenson, Kadarius Toney, Tim Patrick. I think just depth at running back for Ramondre, Kadarius Toney, high upside. Tim Patrick, I think, is just another one of his guys that he sneaky likes this year as a value.
And it's insurance if Sutton doesn't
Yeah.
pan out or gets injured or something like that.
Yep, 100%. 100%. So that wraps up our mock draft 1.0. We will post all of our teams on our socials later today. Tyler, any final thoughts on your draft here? You kind of mentioned Daryl at the end there, but
yeah, no, I'll take the opportunity to say, like, I'm going to be working on some rankings today. I'll probably move Daryl Williams just a little bit up, because he's my running back 43 at the moment, but the receiving work could get him into, like, the late 30s.
Yep.
But I'll be moving Michael Thomas down. I'll be moving Jarvis Landry up. I'll be changing the Browns projections because that Deshaun Watson suspension could be pretty lengthy. So
yes.
It'll be interesting to see when we do a mock draft again and see just how much has changed just off of our rankings and where we take guys and stuff like that.
Yeah, most definitely. I think the only thing for my draft, I think my wide receivers are a little more shaky than I would like, but also, 2 things. Wide receivers are a little bit more shaky than I would have liked, but that's the thing. I can pick up a ton in free agency. I'm not too concerned about it, and especially if my 2 are Jamar Chase and Brandon Cooks and I'm starting every week. I'm not concerned. And I think that, honestly, my other takeaway, I feel like the days of waiting on quarterback are slowly coming to an end. Because you can no longer find a guy in the 10th round. Like, all the top-tier quarterbacks went in the first 9 rounds. I was lucky to get Trey Lance, I think, at the end of round 9. So I think the days of waiting on quarterback are over. May have to adjust that strategy in the future. Well, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas. Don't forget to go get your hands on our draft guide for $5. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, plus your email, so we can send you the draft guide. You can find those links anywhere in our social media bios. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Just Tyler and Lucas hanging out today. 2 Stooges being dudes. Cameron was shooting us some messages in the middle of. He made a TikTok in the middle of our podcast. I haven't watched that yet. So I guess we're 3 Stooges being dudes. Fantasy Football Fellas. Deuces.
Deuces.
God,
I'm oh my gosh.
What?
That Michael Thomas video just
I'm probably going to make a video on it today, because I think, well, not today. I'll probably do one today. Well, here's what I'm going to make one for today, and then I'm going to make another one for tomorrow, since tomorrow's Father's